Just when the York family thought the Prince Andrew scandal could not possibly sink them any deeper into the abyss of public disgrace, a newly unearthed photograph has detonated an unprecedented crisis within the walls of the monarchy. Princess Beatrice and her sister Eugenie believed that maintaining a desperate, low-profile silence would serve as their ultimate salvation, a shield against the sins of their father. They operated under the delusion that the storm had passed, hiding in plain sight while the world's attention shifted. But the past is never truly buried for the Yorks, and a chilling new connection has just dragged Beatrice into the centre of a massive, radioactive, international espionage scandal. The desperate strategy of invisibility has spectacularly backfired, proving that you cannot outrun a legacy built on devastating associations. Before we expose the explosive details of this international scandal and the royal family's ruthless response, impress that like button and subscribe to this channel to join our royal truth-seeking community.
The trap was sprung in the most unlikely of places, captured in a single, devastating frame published by the newspaper. The photograph shows Princess Beatrice during a trip to Nepal, smiling and standing shoulder to shoulder with David Taylor. On the surface, it appeared to be just another philanthropic photo opportunity, the kind of sanitized public relations exercise the Yorks use to justify their continued relevance. But David Taylor is not merely a benevolent travel companion. He is the husband of a prominent Labour MP who was recently arrested in a sweeping, high-stakes investigation into alleged spying activity on behalf of the Chinese state. The contradiction is absolute and lethal. Beatrice, who constantly demands the protections of a blameless private citizen whenever the media questions her family's dark connections, is once again caught dead center in a web of international intrigue. The optics are entirely indefensible. You cannot claim to be a naive private individual when you are repeatedly photographed rubbing shoulders with highly radioactive figures, transitioning seamlessly from the horrifying orbit of Jeffrey Epstein to the immediate proximity of alleged foreign agents. Exclusive theories circulating among elite intelligence watchdogs suggest this was no accidental meeting in the Himalayas. Insider reports indicate that Beatrice's presence in Nepal may have been part of a broader, shadowy network of backdoor diplomatic and commercial introductions, where the cachet of a British princess was allegedly utilized to legitimize individuals operating in the darkest corners of geopolitical espionage. This credibility dilemma has trapped Beatrice in a double bind from which there is no escape. The Yorks have long played a dangerous, duplicitous game, demanding the extreme deference, security, and prestige of their HRH titles while simultaneously hustling in the murky waters of private global finance and high society networking. Whenever the consequences of these shady commercial dealings threaten to breach the surface, Beatrice retreats behind the facade of a private, non-working royal who should be immune from public scrutiny. Yet, the public is not blind to the thematic hypocrisy that defines her existence. Reports have long whispered about the astonishing sums of money moving through the background of the York family's supposedly private ventures, painting a picture of sheer greed and an insatiable desire to leverage their royal status for social climbing. They take money from disgraced billionaires, they align themselves with opaque foreign wealth, and they offer the illusion of royal access to anyone willing to fund their lavish lifestyles. The behavioral flaw is systemic within the York household, a terminal inability to recognize that the title of princess cannot be commodified and sold to the highest bidder without eventually destroying the very foundation of the institution they claim to serve. The escalating stakes have now triggered a brutal and unprecedented reaction from the very top of the monarchy. King Charles, viewing this latest espionage association as a catastrophic threat to the crown's integrity, has officially drawn a line in the sand. Recognizing that the York sisters are walking liabilities, the king has officially withdrawn their royal protection and enacted a ruthless strategy of institutional exile. Charles has concluded that Beatrice and Eugenie must be categorically banned from all major royal public occasions. The era of the York sisters lingering on palace balconies and waving to the crowds is dead. This is not a temporary suspension. This is a permanent excision. The concrete example of this knockout blow is already taking shape behind the locked gates of Buckingham Palace. Directives have been issued, and the sisters are now facing total royal exile. They are explicitly not expected to attend the sacred Easter gathering at Windsor. They have been banished from the Commonwealth Day proceedings, and they are entirely erased from the planning of trooping the color. Their names have been struck from the manifest of working monarchy, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic silence that signals their ultimate irrelevance. As the walls of isolation closed in, the York PR machine launched a desperate, manipulative counteroffensive. In a transparent attempt to engineer public sympathy, sources conveniently leaked narratives to the press claiming that Princess Beatrice was on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown over the crushing weight of her father's crimes and this new onslaught of media scrutiny. It was a calculated emotional appeal, designed to transform a willing participant in the York family's grift into a fragile victim of circumstance. But the public immediately saw through the inauthenticity. This failed emotional appeal was universally rejected as a cynical gaslighting tactic, a final, pathetic attempt to weaponize mental health to deflect accountability for her own terrible judgment. The public understands that true victims do not jet off to foreign nations to mingle with the spouses of alleged spies, nor do they fight tooth and nail to retain taxpayer-funded privileges while engaging in opaque, high-level corporate networking. This total rejection by the public has been mirrored by an absolute quarantine enforced by the future king. Prince William, acting as the unyielding enforcer of the monarchy's survival, has actively advised other senior royals to distance themselves completely from Beatrice and Eugenie. Insider reports detail tense, closed-door meetings at Windsor where William explicitly warned his inner circle that being photographed with the York sisters is now considered a direct threat to their own reputations. He has built an invisible wall around the working royals, leaving Beatrice and Eugenie entirely isolated, wandering the periphery of an institution that no longer wants them. They are ghost-like figures, clinging to the fading echoes of their former status. With their reputations lying in absolute tatters and their royal perks systematically revoked, the point of no return has been violently breached. Constitutional experts and palace insiders are now quietly suggesting that the only remaining option for Beatrice and Eugenie is to completely drop their princess titles of their own volition before the king is forced to strip them by official decree. The clock is ticking. The evidence of their catastrophic associations is burned into the public record. And the York sisters are about to discover exactly what happens when you try to sell the crown to the highest bidder. To understand the sheer magnitude of this unprecedented royal collapse, one must examine the dark, subterranean machinery of how foreign intelligence networks operate, and how precisely the York family became the ultimate soft targets. The photograph in Nepal was not a mere holiday snapshot. It was a geographic and political trap, a visual confirmation of the catastrophic vulnerabilities that have plagued Prince Andrew's bloodline for decades. Intelligence analysts and insider reports suggest that hostile state actors do not simply approach their primary targets directly. They build elaborate, invisible webs of association, utilizing high-profile, oblivious figures as stepping stones to legitimacy. Beatrice, desperate to project an aura of global philanthropic importance while simultaneously seeking lucrative corporate networking opportunities, walked blindly into a meticulously curated environment. The presence of David Taylor, tethered directly to an alleged Chinese espionage operation infiltrating the highest echelons of British parliamentary democracy, transforms Beatrice from a naive princess into a geopolitical liability of the highest order. The insidious nature of modern espionage relies on the exploitation of useful idiots, individuals whose blinding arrogance, insatiable greed, and desperate need for social validation blind them to the predators circling in their periphery. The Yorks have historically demonstrated a lethal inability to vet their associates, driven by an unyielding hunger for the extravagant billionaire lifestyle that their taxpayer-funded allowances could never truly sustain. This is not a new behavioral flaw. It is the genetic rot of the York family tree. It is the exact same moral bankruptcy and financial desperation that drove Prince Andrew into the horrifying, parasitic embrace of Jeffrey Epstein. The players may have changed, and the locations may have shifted from private Caribbean islands to the high altitudes of the Himalayas, but the underlying mechanism remains disgustingly identical. They offer the illusion of royal access, the glimmer of the crown, in exchange for private jets, undisclosed investments, and proximity to opaque wealth. Beatrice and Eugenie have spent their entire adult lives straddling this dangerous, hypocritical divide, demanding the absolute deference and security of their HRH titles while hustling in the murky, unregulated waters of international art dealing, tech consulting, and global venture capital. They weaponize their royal lineage, using it as a skeleton key to unlock corporate boardrooms and secure highly paid advisory roles that their actual professional resumes could never justify. Reports have long whispered about backdoor commissions, access capitalism, and the shadowy flow of favors that define their supposedly private careers. They believed they could operate in the shadows, immune to the consequences of their father's annihilation. But the blinding flash of that camera in Nepal has permanently exposed their grift to the world. The reaction from Buckingham Palace has been nothing short of a ruthless, systematic eradication of the York sisters from the public face of the monarchy. King Charles, operating with the cold, calculating precision of a monarch desperate to protect the institution from a terminal infection, has turned the palace into a fortress. The withdrawal of their royal protection is not merely a financial decision. It is a profound symbolic excommunication. It is the king stripping them of their armor, leaving them completely exposed to the harsh realities of the private lives they claim to desire. Behind the heavily guarded walls of Windsor and Buckingham Palace, a brutal, bureaucratic machine has been activated. Memos have been circulated across all royal households, dictating that Beatrice and Eugenie are to be excised from every official schedule, every balcony appearance, and every state function. The majestic, unifying spectacle of trooping the color will proceed without them. The solemn, dignified gathering at the cenotaph will not feature their presence. The Easter service at St. George's Chapel, once a guaranteed opportunity for the Yorks to parade their inherited privilege, has been explicitly denied to them. They have been banished to the absolute fringes of royal existence, forced to watch from the outside as the institution they bled dry moves forward without them. This institutional exile is absolute, a devastating reality check for two women who spent their lives believing their bloodline guaranteed them permanent relevance. The psychological toll of this banishment is entirely of their own making, yet their immediate response was to deploy the exact same manipulative, toxic public relations strategies that ultimately destroyed their father. When the walls began to close in and the media scrutiny reached a fever pitch over the espionage connection, the York PR machine launched a sickeningly transparent emotional offensive. Anonymous sources, echoing the desperate tactics of a cornered animal, flooded the tabloids with exclusive theories claiming Princess Beatrice was suffering a catastrophic mental breakdown. They painted a pathetic portrait of a fragile daughter buckling under the immense, unfair pressure of Prince Andrew's lingering crimes and the relentless cruelty of the press. It was a calculated, deeply cynical attempt to weaponize mental health, designed to force the public and the king into a corner of sympathetic silence. But the absolute failure of this emotional appeal was instantaneous and brutal. The public, hardened by years of York deception, recognized the gaslighting tactic immediately. You cannot spend years leveraging your title to mingle with billionaires, securing lucrative corporate positions, and jet-setting across the globe on the dime of questionable financiers, only to instantly claim the fragile victimhood of a private citizen the moment your associates are arrested for international treason. The inauthenticity was staggering, a grotesque display of privilege attempting to shield itself from accountability. The public saw a woman who demands the perks of a princess while operating with the moral compass of a back-alley corporate broker. This hypocrisy is the core thematic rot of the York existence. They want the glittering tiaras, the taxpayer-funded security, the bowing and curtsying, and the historical prestige, but they entirely refuse the duty, the transparency, and the moral restrictions that those privileges demand. They want to be royalty on their own selfish terms, treating the crown not as a sacred duty to the British people, but as a heavily leveraged asset in their own private portfolios. This spectacular collapse of public goodwill has been matched only by the iron-fisted quarantine enforced by the heir to the throne. Prince William has observed the York family's endless parade of scandals with mounting disgust, viewing them not just as an embarrassment, but as an existential threat to the long-term survival of the monarchy he is destined to inherit. William understands that in the modern era, the crown survives strictly on credibility, and the Yorks are a radioactive leak contaminating the entire institution. Insider reports detail an unprecedented intervention by the Prince of Wales, a direct, uncompromising directive issued to the remaining working royals. William has actively, aggressively advised Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Sophie to enact a total blackout regarding Beatrice and Eugenie. He has warned them that any association, any leaked photograph, any whispered conversation at a private family gathering that finds its way into the press will be viewed as a betrayal of the king's slimmed-down monarchy. He has effectively built an invisible, impenetrable wall around the York sisters, leaving them wandering through a wasteland of total isolation. They are no longer treated as family. They are treated as hostile entities, dangerous liabilities who must be kept at a permanent, undeniable distance. This is the brutal reality of their exile. They are trapped in a purgatory of their own creation, stripped of their royal protections, banished from the institution's public life, and quarantined by their own family. The escalating stakes have now pushed this crisis to the absolute point of no return. The York sisters are staring down the barrel of total institutional annihilation. Their reputations lie in smoking ruins, their corporate contacts are rapidly distancing themselves from the radioactive fallout of the espionage scandal, and their royal perks have been systematically dismantled. Constitutional experts, operating in the shadows of Whitehall and Buckingham Palace, are now quietly circulating legal frameworks that could execute the final, devastating blow. The narrative is shifting from a temporary banishment to a permanent legal severing. Exclusive theories suggest that the king's legal advisors are exploring the unprecedented step of formally revoking their letters patent, an act that would forcibly strip Beatrice and Eugenie of the princess titles they have so shamelessly abused. The humiliation of this impending threat is staggering. To avoid the ultimate disgrace of being stripped of their titles by royal decree, insiders suggest they are being heavily pressured to voluntarily relinquish their HRH status, to step down into the obscurity of private life before they are pushed. They are facing the agonizing choice between surrendering their remaining shred of royal identity or waiting for the king to drop the final, fatal guillotine on the legacy of the York family. This is the catastrophic endgame of sheer greed and unchecked arrogance, the moment the bill finally comes due for a lifetime of leveraging the crown for personal gain, leaving Beatrice and Eugenie completely exposed to the unforgiving judgment of history. The final descent into absolute constitutional annihilation has begun, and the mechanisms of destruction are operating with a cold, terrifying silence behind the fortified gates of Buckingham Palace. To comprehend the ultimate, irreversible tragedy of the York family, one must look past the superficial tabloid headlines and peer into the subterranean, Machiavellian legal warfare currently being waged at the highest levels of the British government. Insider reports from the darkest corridors of Whitehall suggest that the king's most senior legal advisors, working in tandem with the shadowy echelons of MI5, have compiled a devastating, black-bound dossier detailing the sheer, unmitigated catastrophic risk posed by Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. This is no longer merely a matter of public relations. It has escalated into a full-blown issue of national security and institutional survival. The photograph in Nepal, positioning Beatrice next to a man deeply entangled in an alleged Chinese espionage network, was the final, fatal catalyst that activated a legal guillotine that has been looming over the Yorks since the spectacular downfall of Prince Andrew. Exclusive theories circulating among constitutional scholars indicate that the king is currently reviewing draft instruments designed to execute an unprecedented historical maneuver: the forced, involuntary revocation of their letters patent. The letters patent are the sacred legal foundation of their royal identity, the ancient royal decrees that bestow the title of Royal Highness and Princess upon them. For decades, Beatrice and Eugenie have treated these titles not as solemn duties to the sovereign, but as impenetrable shields and lucrative commercial assets, weaponizing their bloodline to extract maximum financial and social capital from the global elite. Now, the very institution that granted them this power is preparing to rip it away by force. Imagine the sheer, suffocating terror gripping the York household as the reality of this impending execution sets in. They are trapped in a decaying, gilded cage, frantically working their phones, only to find that the billionaires, the tech oligarchs, and the international art brokers who once fawned over their royal status are now slamming the doors shut. The taint of international espionage is the ultimate corporate poison. Legitimate businesses and elite social networks are brutally severing ties, terrified of the radioactive fallout of being associated with a family that transitions so effortlessly from the monstrous crimes of Jeffrey Epstein to the geopolitical treachery of alleged foreign state actors. The financial collapse of their supposedly private careers is happening in real time. Reports paint a pathetic picture of lucrative advisory roles being quietly terminated, backdoor commission structures drying up, and luxury brand ambassadorships evaporating into thin air. Without the HRH prefix to act as a skeleton key, Beatrice and Eugenie are suddenly reduced to entirely unexceptional individuals, possessing no unique skills, no leverage, and a family name that has become synonymous with generational grift and global scandal. They are staring into the abyss of a future where they must actually survive on merit, a concept utterly foreign to a family that has spent their entire existence leeching off the historical prestige of the crown. The architect of this ruthless, unapologetic quarantine is Prince William, who has emerged as the iron-fisted enforcer of a modernized, unyielding monarchy. William views the Yorks not with familial pity, but with a cold, calculating disgust. He understands that the survival of the crown depends entirely on the swift, brutal excision of infected tissue. Insider reports detail secret, highly pressurized summits between William and the King, where the Prince of Wales laid out an absolute, non-negotiable ultimatum. The York sisters must be systematically erased from the royal narrative, or the entire institution risks being dragged down into their cesspool of compromised associations. William has weaponized his influence, transforming his inner circle into an impenetrable fortress that actively rejects any proximity to Beatrice and Eugenie. He has forbidden his staff from coordinating with their representatives. He has barred them from entering the inner sanctums of royal estates during family gatherings. And he has made it explicitly clear to the British aristocracy that any public show of support for the Yorks will be viewed as a direct insult to the future king. This invisible wall of isolation has left the sisters wandering like ghosts through the periphery of a world they once ruled, utterly paralyzed by the realization that their social and institutional execution is total and permanent. The psychological warfare being inflicted upon Beatrice and Eugenie is designed to force a single agonizing outcome: capitulation. The king's strategy, layered in ruthless, silent pressure, is to squeeze the York sisters until they break, forcing them to voluntarily surrender their titles before the crown is forced to publicly strip them. They are being cornered into drafting the very press releases of their own demise. Exclusive theories suggest that palace emissaries have delivered a stark, uncompromising message to Royal Lodge. Drop the princess titles of your own volition, retreat into permanent, silent obscurity, and the palace will allow you to fade away without further legal humiliation. Refuse, and the king will unleash the full, devastating weight of the crown's constitutional authority, publicly declaring them unfit to bear the royal name and formally casting them out into the wilderness. This is the agonizing double bind, the inescapable trap built by their own sheer greed and arrogance. If they cling to the titles, they invite forced humiliation and potential parliamentary intervention. If they surrender them, they lose the only currency that has ever given their lives meaning. The collapse of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie is the ultimate tragic climax of the York family's pathological inability to respect the boundaries of their privilege. They arrogantly demanded the absolute protections of royalty, while simultaneously rolling the dice in the darkest, most unregulated casinos of global influence and dark money. They believed they were untouchable, wrapped in the protective velvet of their grandmother's affection and their father's deluded entitlement. But the era of the indulgent monarchy is dead. King Charles and Prince William are operating a wartime monarchy, a ruthless, pragmatic institution that prioritizes survival over sentimentality. The photograph of Beatrice smiling alongside the husband of an alleged Chinese spy was the final spark that ignited the powder keg of their own destruction. They have completely destroyed their public standing, exposed the deep, thematic hypocrisy of their existence, and proven to the world that the York legacy is nothing more than a cautionary tale of hubris, entitlement, and moral bankruptcy. As the final curtain falls on their public lives, they are left with nothing but the smoldering ruins of their reputations, forever exiled from the balconies, the palaces, and the history books they so desperately tried to manipulate. The fall of the Yorks is complete. Their exile is absolute, and their absolute irrelevance is now permanently etched into the annals of the British monarchy. If you want to continue uncovering the hidden, unvarnished truth behind the palace walls and stay ahead of the royal family's darkest secrets, impress that like button and subscribe to this channel right now.